Dear listener, to Sleepy Story Facts, a gentle bedtime story, a soft nighttime story, and a relaxing story designed to help you fall asleep. While the calmest corners of science drift quietly around you like starlight settling on still water, tonight we begin with rockets, not in a loud or hurried way, not with bright alarms or shaking ground, but in the simplest and most peaceful way possible, as if a rocket were not a machine in a rush, but a patient thought rising slowly through the dark, a silver candle waiting to understand the sky before we follow it anywhere. Let yourself settle in. Let the bed hold your weight without effort. Let your jaw loosen, your forehead smooth, your shoulders sink by a tiny and almost unnoticeable amount. Breathe in slowly, as if the air itself were made of velvet, and breathe out even more slowly, as if the night were exhaling through you. Feel the blanket resting over you like a calm layer of atmosphere, gentle and constant. And notice how nothing needs to be solved right now. Nothing needs to be fixed, and nothing needs to move any faster than this easy, floating breath. In this sleep story, in this calming narration for deep sleep, we will let every fact arrive softly, one at a time. Simple physics with no stress, like small lanterns being placed along a quiet path somewhere far from hurry, in a peaceful launch meadow at the edge of evening. A rocket stands on its pad beneath a darkening blue sky. It does not seem impatient. It simply waits, slim and still, as if listening to the earth beneath it. One of the first comforting facts about rockets is that they move by a very simple rule. When something is pushed one way, something else is pushed the other way. A rocket does not need to press against the ground once it leaves. Instead, it throws hot gas downward, and the rocket itself is gently urged upward in response. This is Newton's third law, though tonight it can feel less like a law and more like a lullaby of balance, a quiet agreement in the universe that every action has a companion, every motion a reply. So already, even before sleep fully takes you, the rocket becomes less mysterious. It is not fighting the heavens. It is participating in a conversation of forces, releasing one stream and receiving another, giving downward and gliding upward. Another soft fact is that rockets carry their own fuel and oxidizer, because space has no air to help with burning. Here on Earth, a candle borrows oxygen from the room, but a rocket is more self-contained, more prepared, more like a traveler carrying all it needs in careful compartments. There is something restful in that idea, something complete. The rocket does not hope the sky will provide. It arrives ready, with its chemistry tucked neatly inside. And chemistry, too, can be gentle in the mind when we keep it simple. Fuel stores energy in its bonds, and when it reacts with oxidizer, some of that energy becomes expanding hot gas, and that gas rushing outward becomes the soft engine of ascent. We do not need equations tonight. We only need the image of stored sunlight from ancient materials, waking into warmth and motion. Now, imagine the rocket still resting in the velvet dark, its white surface touched by moonlight. The launch tower nearby as quiet as a sleeping tree. Underneath the calm metal skin are tanks, pipes, valves, and guidance systems. But nothing here feels crowded. Each part has one small purpose: tanks hold, engines direct, computers guide, structure support. Even great complexity, when seen gently, is only many simple duties performed together in silence. And perhaps that is another relaxing truth, one that belongs not only to rockets, but to life itself. Difficult things often become softer when broken into small and patient pieces. Rockets also rise best when they become lighter as they travel. This is why many rockets use stages. A lower stage does the early heavy work, lifting fuel, engines, and structure through the thick lower air. And when its job is complete, it falls away, allowing the upper stage to continue with less weight to carry. Nothing dramatic is needed in the mind to picture this. Think of it as a traveler removing a heavy coat after leaving a warm house, or a boat setting down cargo as the river grows easier. The principle is simple and deeply soothing. What is no longer needed can be released. As the imagined night grows quieter around us, the rocket remains at rest for just a little longer. And in that pause, we can notice one more peaceful fact. Gravity is not only the thing rockets work against. Gravity is also what keeps the launch field beneath them, the oceans in their basins, the air close to the trees, and you comfortably settled into your bed. Gravity is not an enemy here. It is the reason resting feels natural. Rockets rise for a while by overcoming some of it, but even they are shaped by its patient pull, curving through the sky in graceful arcs, because Earth is always there beneath them, steady and faithful. Soon, in the next part, we may lift very slowly into that arc ourselves, but not yet. For now, stay in the launch meadow, where crickets murmur in the grass, where the last twilight fades behind distant hills, and where a slender rocket dreams of motion without any need to hurry. Let that image stay with you as a gentle bedtime picture. A quiet machine, a quiet sky, a quiet mind, and simple physics resting together in one peaceful place, waiting for sleep to arrive as naturally as night. Now, very softly, the waiting ends, and in this sleep story, the rocket begins its rise so smoothly that it seems less like a launch and more like a long exhale, finally becoming visible, a silver shape lifting from the quiet field on a cushion of pale fire, not in violence, but in balance. Because one of the most calming facts about rockets is that their upward journey begins with an exchange, hot gases streaming down while the vehicle itself is encouraged upward. And even this can be imagined as a graceful trade rather than a struggle. A bedtime story of motion answering motion, of the earth allowing a brief departure, while still holding the scene together with its faithful gravity. As the rocket leaves the pad, it moves first through the thickest part of the atmosphere, and the atmosphere, though invisible, is real and softly present, like layers of cool fabric draped around the world, denser close to the ground and thinner higher up, which is why the early part of flight asks for patience and strength, and why rockets are designed with smooth shapes that help air slide past them instead of tumbling into chaos. Another simple and soothing fact is that air resistance, often called drag, is just the atmosphere's way of objecting to being moved aside too quickly. And so engineers shape the rocket's nose into a fair curve, not unlike the rounded front of a seed or a raindrop, because gentle forms pass more kindly through a fluid world beneath the outer shell. Fuel continues to flow in a controlled stream toward the engines, and this too can be understood without any hurry, because a rocket engine is, in one peaceful sense, a place where stored energy is invited to expand, and the expanding gas, finding only one open direction through the nozzle, slips away at great speed and leaves the rocket free to climb. The nozzle itself has a quietly elegant purpose, narrowing and then widening, so the gas can accelerate and organize its movement. And there is something deeply restful in that design, a reminder that direction can create calm, that even heat and pressure become useful when guided with care. As the rocket rises higher, the sound below would grow fainter to anyone far away in the meadow. And to us, in this calming narration, that fading is important, because the higher it goes, the more the world below softens into dark shapes and moonlit distances, and the rocket enters a region where the sky is no longer the bright blue of daytime memory, but a deeper and gentler indigo. Here is another relaxing fact about rockets and simple physics. They do not go straight up forever, because reaching space is not only about height, but also about moving sideways fast enough to continually fall around the Earth instead of back into it. This is the secret tenderness of orbit, that it is a kind of endless falling that never arrives, a curved motion where forward speed and gravity remain in quiet partnership. So even now, though our rocket is still climbing, its path will gradually lean, ever so slightly, from vertical to horizontal, not because it has abandoned the sky above, but because the most peaceful routes in space are often curved ones inside the rocket. Every kilogram matters, and that is why mass becomes one of the central facts of rocket science. Simple and almost cozy when imagined properly, because mass is just how much matter must be persuaded to move, and the more mass a rocket carries, the more fuel it needs, while the more fuel it carries, the more mass it begins with, creating the thoughtful puzzle engineers have solved through staging, lightweight materials, and careful planning. Soon the first stage will finish its work, and when it does, it will separate, not as a loss, but as a release, like setting down a satchel after a long walk. And this is one of the loveliest lessons hidden inside rocket flight. Progress often becomes easier when what has already served its purpose is allowed to drift away. The rocket, now slimmer and lighter, continues upward through thinning air, and the thinning itself is another quiet wonder, because the higher one goes, the fewer molecules there are to press, buffet, or warm the outer skin, until the sky ceases to behave like weather and begins to feel more like an enormous open room. Temperature, too, becomes a gentle topic here, because space is not warm in the earthly way, and not cold in the windy way either. It is mostly empty, which means heat moves differently there, mainly by radiation, gliding as invisible energy rather than surrounding an object through direct contact. This is why spacecraft use special coatings and careful thermal design, and why even in the vastness, survival depends on balance, not unlike deep sleep itself, where the body rests best when its conditions are steady, its rhythms even, its small systems quietly cooperating. In this nighttime story, our rocket is still climbing. And from this height, the clouds below look less like weather and more like a white, dreaming sea, smooth and luminous under the moon, while the continents darken into broad sleeping forms, and the curvature of Earth begins, almost shyly, to reveal itself. There's no need to rush ahead. We can remain in this slow ascent a little longer, noticing that guidance computers make tiny adjustments, not because the rocket is lost, but because precision is a form of calm, and tiny corrections made early are kinder than large ones made late. That idea belongs to physics, but it also belongs beautifully to rest. A small breath, a small release of the shoulders, a small surrender to the pillow, and the whole journey becomes easier. So let the rocket go on climbing in your mind, steady and pale against the dark, carrying its quiet chemistry, its simple laws, its patient momentum, and let every fact grow softer as you hear it, until rockets become not loud machines at all, but serene lanterns of motion, showing how even a path to the stars can begin in order, balance, and peace. And now, in this gentle bedtime story, as the rocket climbs beyond the thicker layers of air and into a darker, quieter blue, the moment arrives for one of the calmest and most elegant facts in all of sleepy science, because the first stage, having done its steady work, begins to separate. And it does so not with sadness, not with strain, but with the serene logic of a journey becoming lighter as it goes, like a boat casting off a rope once the shore is far behind, or a traveler placing a finished lantern on the ground and walking onward by moonlight alone. For a little while, the lower stage carried the heavy burden of lifting full tanks, engines, structure, and hope through the densest part of the atmosphere. And now its task is complete, which means the upper part of the rocket may continue with less mass to guide, less weight to carry, and less effort required for each next quiet kilometer. This is one of the most relaxing facts about rockets. Simple physics with no stress, because a rocket becomes more efficient when it no longer drags along hardware that has already done its part. And the universe, in its patient way, seems almost to reward the art of letting go. Separation itself can be imagined very softly here. A clean and careful drift apart, one piece falling back along a graceful path toward Earth, while the upper stage, newly light and calm, carries on toward the stillness above. And there is something so comforting in the thought that progress does not always mean adding more, but sometimes means carrying less. The engine of the upper stage now glows into life with a steadier, more delicate purpose, because the air around it is thinner and the job has changed. This engine is no longer mainly pushing through drag and dense atmosphere, but shaping a path toward speed. And speed in rocket travel is a quietly important word, because to reach orbit, a spacecraft must move not only high enough, but fast enough sideways that, as it falls toward Earth, the ground curves away beneath it. So orbit, in this relaxing story, is not a place with a gate or wall, but a condition of balance, a moving piece, a perfect agreement between forward motion and gravity, where the rocket is always descending, and always missing the ground. The higher our silver companion climbs, the darker the sky becomes, until daylight no longer spreads evenly through the air, but gathers mainly around the curved rim of the world below, where Earth now appears vast and gentle, clothed in thin blue atmosphere that looks almost impossibly delicate, like a silk thread wrapped around a sleeping globe. Another comforting fact is that most of the atmosphere is surprisingly close to the surface compared with the size of Earth itself, which means the blanket of air that holds weather, breath, birds, and cloud is slender and precious, and from above it seems tender rather than ordinary. Our rocket moves beyond that blanket now, and as it does, familiar sensations begin to soften into something quieter. There is less buffeting, less friction, less of the restless touch of air on metal, and more of the great stillness of near space, where motion continues, but feels almost invisible, as if travel itself has become a secret. In this sleep story, in this calming narration for deep sleep, that change matters, because it reminds the listener that not all journeys feel dramatic from the inside. Sometimes immense progress is smooth, controlled, and nearly silent. One small guidance adjustment, then another, and the upper stage keeps refining its path, because precision is another form of gentleness, a way of using small corrections so that no large correction is needed later. The fuel continues to empty from the tanks, and this, too, is soothing when seen the sleepy way, because the rocket grows lighter not by accident, but by design. Each second of engine burn reducing the mass that must be carried forward, each second making the same thrust more effective. It is almost like watching a candle become shorter, while its light grows more meaningful, or listening to a long sigh that leaves the chest softer than before. By now, the earth beneath has changed from landscape to shape, from fields and coasts into broad patterns of darkness and cloud, and the horizon is no longer a line ahead, but a curved edge embracing the world. Weightlessness has not fully arrived for our imagined passengers just because they are high up, and that is another simple rocket fact worth resting beside, because the floating feeling of orbit comes not from escaping gravity entirely, but from moving in continuous freefall, where rocket and rider descend together at the same rate. So even the dream of floating has a grounded explanation, and perhaps that is why science can feel so calming at night, because it does not take wonder away. It gives wonder a shape soft enough to hold. The upper stage burns on with patient commitment, trading stored chemical energy for velocity, and the nozzle behind it lets hot gases stream outward in a disciplined silver plume, longer now in the emptier surroundings, less shoved and scattered by air, more free to unfold. Soon, very soon, the climb will become less steep and more horizontal, because spaceflight is a lesson in curves, in timing, in gradualness, and in trusting that the right path is not always the most direct-looking one. So let your mind drift with the rocket as it rounds itself gently into the dark, its path smoothing, its burden easing, its purpose narrowing into something clean and quiet. And as it does, let your own thoughts do the same, releasing whatever has already served today, keeping only what is light enough to carry into rest, until this nighttime story becomes a soft companion at the edge of sleep, and the rocket, no longer a machine of noise or effort, becomes a calm silver idea, moving carefully into the stars. Now the rocket begins one of the softest transitions in all of sleepy science, because its path, which once felt like an upward climb, slowly becomes a gentle curve. And in this sleep story, that curve can be imagined as the most natural thing in the world, like a swan turning across a dark lake, or a silk ribbon settling through still air. For the great secret of orbit is not that a rocket reaches a certain gate in the sky, but that it learns the exact kind of motion that lets it keep falling around the earth without returning to the ground. And that simple idea, so elegant and so calm, is one of the most relaxing facts about rockets. The engine continues its steady burn, not hurried, not strained, but patient and exact, adding more sideways speed with every quiet second, because height alone is never enough for orbit. And this is a soothing truth to rest beside tonight, that in spaceflight, as in a gentle bedtime, balance matters more than force, rhythm more than drama, and careful timing more than noise. Below, the earth has become vast and curved, a sleeping world wrapped in dim cloud bands and soft continents, with the atmosphere now appearing as a thin blue line, so delicate that it seems almost painted by breath. And from here, another peaceful fact arrives. The air that feels endless when we stand beneath the open sky is, compared with Earth itself, only a slender layer, a fine blanket hugging the world, precious and light, holding weather, birds, rain, and every familiar sound close to the surface. The rocket, now moving above most of that air, begins to feel the deep quiet of near space, where there's almost no drag left to smooth away. And because drag has nearly faded, the vehicle no longer needs to spend so much effort pushing through resistance, which means more of its energy may be devoted to shaping the graceful velocity needed for orbit. Another gentle fact about rocket physics is that speed in space is not the same as speed on a road, because there is no pavement beneath, no windscreen view of passing signs, only a relationship between motion and gravity. And the rocket does not need to feel fast in a dramatic way to be doing something extraordinary. It only needs to move with exquisite precision, like a note held perfectly in tune inside the imagined craft. If there were a cup of water, it would not settle in the familiar, earthly way once free fall truly begins. And this is because weightlessness is not the absence of gravity, but the shared falling of everything together, craft and cup and drop alike, all descending along the same curved path, so that there is no floor pushing upward in the usual way. That idea is so wonderfully calm, because it means floating is not an escape from nature, but a special expression of nature, a quiet arrangement of motion where gravity remains present, faithful as ever, while the forward speed of the rocket keeps carrying the fall sideways around the planet. The upper stage continues to burn, and the fuel within it grows steadily less, which makes the rocket lighter. And becoming lighter means each remaining moment of thrust can do a little more. A principle that might sound technical by day, but at night feels almost tender, as if the machine itself were shedding heaviness in order to move more easily through the dark. Engineers think carefully about this balance of mass and motion long before any launch ever begins, because every kilogram carried upward asks to be accelerated, and every extra piece must justify its place. So rockets become quiet lessons in simplicity, in choosing what is necessary, in carrying only what truly serves the journey. Soon the burn nears its planned ending, and that moment is one of the loveliest in our nighttime story, because orbital insertion, though it sounds formal, is really the instant when motion and altitude finally agree with one another, when the path becomes stable enough for the spacecraft to circle the Earth in continuous freefall. And there is something deeply peaceful in imagining that agreement arriving not with a shout, but with a soft conclusion, the way a final note of music settles perfectly into silence. The engine cuts off, and at once the scene becomes even quieter, the long silver plume gone, the craft now gliding rather than pressing. And here comes one more beautiful fact. In space, when engines are off and drag is almost absent, motion persists naturally, so a spacecraft can keep traveling without needing constant pushing, which means the rocket now coasts in a calm that feels nearly dreamlike, upheld not by ongoing effort, but by the momentum it has already gathered. Below, oceans reflect traces of moonlight, cloud systems turn in enormous sleeping spirals, and the horizon curves onward without end, while above there is only velvet blackness and the patient scatter of stars. In this relaxing story, in this gentle bedtime of simple physics and calming narration, orbit is not a triumph to celebrate loudly, but a hush to enter softly, a high and quiet path where nothing needs to rush any longer. So let your thoughts follow the rocket as it glides into this balanced motion, circling the world with no strain, carrying its stored warmth, its careful engineering, and its silent understanding of gravity. And as it does, let your own mind curve into rest in the same unforced way, releasing the straight lines of the day, accepting the gentler arc of night, until even the idea of movement feels slow and kind, and sleep gathers around you as smoothly as Earth gathers the moonlit clouds below. Now that the rocket has settled into orbit, the whole journey becomes quieter still. And in this gentle bedtime story, the change is so smooth that it feels like slipping from wakefulness into the first soft layer of deep rest, because once the engines are silent and the path is set, the spacecraft no longer needs to strain upward through air or argue with the thick lower sky, and instead it simply glides, carrying its motion forward through the velvet dark in a long and peaceful curve around the Earth. One of the most relaxing facts about rockets is that after the hard work of reaching orbit, there can be long stretches of calm coasting. And coasting is such a lovely word for night, because it suggests trust, momentum, and the quiet reward of effort already completed. Inside the spacecraft, everything that once seemed heavy on Earth now appears to float, not because weight has vanished like a dream, but because the craft and everything within it are falling together in the same graceful path. And that means there is no floor pressing upward in the ordinary way, no constant reminder of downward pull, only the soft freedom of shared motion. In this sleep story, that floating can be imagined very simply, like a scarf drifting in still air, or a drop of water hanging like a tiny moon, round and shimmering, held in shape by surface tension, which is another calm fact from sleepy science, because when gravity stops dominating the shape of small things, other forces become easier to notice. Surface tension, so modest and patient, gathers water into beads because the molecules prefer staying close together. And there is something deeply soothing in that preference, a reminder that even in space, even in near weightlessness, the universe still likes gentle bonds. Through a window, the earth turns below in broad and silent beauty. And now our nighttime story offers one of the quiet wonders of orbit, because a spacecraft moving quickly around the planet may witness sunrise and sunset far more often than someone on the ground. And yet, these are not rushed or noisy dawns, but thin crescents of light spreading across the curved edge of the world. Gold touching blue, blue touching black, each layer of atmosphere catching the sun with delicate precision. Another simple and restful fact is that the atmosphere bends and scatters sunlight, which is why the edge of Earth can glow in bands of color. And from orbit, those bands appear like fine threads stitched around a sleeping globe, a narrow luminous seam where day and night meet without conflict. The rocket stage, or the spacecraft it has carried, moves onward not because space is pulling it ahead like a river, but because motion continues naturally when there is almost nothing to slow it down. And this is one of the calmest ideas in physics, that an object already in motion keeps moving unless something changes it. A thought from Newton that feels almost like a lullaby when heard slowly enough. On Earth, things usually stop because of friction, rolling resistance, or air. But up here, the emptiness is so complete that motion can last and last. And the spacecraft travels on in a kind of patient agreement with the laws of nature, not forcing its way through space, but simply continuing. Even the stars feel different from here, not twinkling as they do when seen through layers of moving air from the ground, but shining more steadily against the black, because twinkling is not a property of the stars themselves, but of our atmosphere shifting the light on its way down. That is another comforting fact. Sometimes what seems restless belongs not to the distant thing we are observing, but to the medium through which we see it. The earth below rotates gently, oceans dark and glossy, cloud fields curled like white wool, city lights appearing in delicate constellations of their own. And every glowing cluster suggests quiet homes, quiet streets, quiet bedrooms where others, too, are turning toward sleep. In this relaxing story, the spacecraft passes overnight, and then into a wash of dawn, and the sunlight touches its outer skin with sudden brightness, not warmth in the immediate human sense, but radiant energy traveling across the vacuum. And because heat in space moves mainly through radiation, engineers must think carefully about coatings, angles, and materials, so that the craft neither overheats in sunlight nor cools too deeply in shadow. Yet even that engineering feels serene tonight, because thermal balance is simply another form of bedtime wisdom. Another example of how rest comes from steadiness, from small systems quietly keeping one another in harmony. Imagine now that you are near the window, looking outward with no need to name every ocean or cloud bank, only noticing the immense gentleness of the view, the way the world seems whole from here, the way borders disappear, the way storms themselves look softened by distance, and the way the spacecraft, once a roaring idea on the launch field, has become a floating room carried by patience, precision, and the oldest rules of motion. So let this chapter carry you more deeply into calm as the craft continues along its circular path, not hurrying, not hesitating, simply moving because it has already learned how. And let that be your lesson for this gentle bedtime as well, that not every peaceful journey requires more effort, because sometimes the deepest rest begins when you stop pushing and allow the quiet momentum of night to hold you, the way orbit holds the spacecraft, the way gravity holds the Earth, and the way sleep, if invited softly enough, holds you at last as the spacecraft continues its peaceful path around the Earth. Another layer of sleepy science begins to reveal itself, and this part of the journey is especially calm because nothing grand or dramatic needs to happen for motion to remain beautiful. For one of the most relaxing facts about rockets is that once they are in orbit, even the tiniest adjustments can matter. And those adjustments are often made by very small thrusters that give the craft a gentle nudge rather than a great push, like fingertips turning a paper lantern so it faces a softer light. In this bedtime story, the spacecraft now drifts through a long region of shadow, with the sun hidden behind the curve of the Earth and the stars steady beyond the window. And here in the cool dark, it becomes easy to imagine how carefully a craft must know its own direction. Because in space, it is not enough merely to be somewhere. It is also important to be pointed the right way, with antennas facing home, instruments facing outward, and solar panels turning toward light when light returns. This is called attitude control, and tonight it can feel less like a technical phrase and more like a gentle posture. The quiet way a body settles into comfort, the subtle turning of a pillow, the small adjustment of a blanket edge, until everything feels just right. One calming fact is that a spacecraft can rotate without moving far from its path, which means direction and location are not the same thing. And that distinction is so soft and useful to the mind because it reminds us that sometimes we do not need to be somewhere else entirely to feel better. We only need a slight change in orientation, a quieter angle, a kinder way of facing the dark to make those small turns. Tiny thrusters may release brief puffs of gas, and each puff follows the same simple physics we have already come to trust: action and reaction in delicate partnership. The gas drifting one way and the craft turning the other, not sharply, not abruptly, but with the patience of a compass needle settling toward north. Other spacecraft use spinning wheels inside, called reaction wheels, and these are among the loveliest facts in sleepy rocket science, because a wheel turning one way inside the craft can cause the craft itself to turn the other way, all through the sharing of angular momentum, a phrase that might sound formal by daylight, but at night becomes becomes almost musical, as if motion were being passed from one quiet dancer to another. Imagine that hidden wheel spinning softly in the silence, and imagine the craft responding with a slow and graceful turn, bringing its panels toward the place where sunlight will soon rise again over the edge of the earth. Another peaceful fact is that solar panels do not store sunlight itself, but convert light into electricity, using special materials that let tiny charges move when photons arrive. And though the process belongs to physics, it can be pictured very simply as a kind of waking, light touching a surface, and the surface answering with current, enough to power instruments, communications, heaters, computers, and the many patient systems that keep a craft alive in the dark. During eclipse, when the spacecraft passes through Earth's shadow, batteries take over, and that is comforting too, because spaceflight always depends on preparation, on knowing that light will not always be present, and that stored energy must carry the quiet work forward until brightness returns. Outside, the earth below is darker now, and the cities gleam more clearly. Thin golden webs spread across continents, soft clusters beside coasts, long threads along rivers and roads. And from this height, the human world looks less busy than tender. Each light a sign of shelter, of someone reading, someone dreaming, someone already asleep. The craft glides on, and because there is almost no air here, there is no rustle against the hull, no whisper of wind, only the deep stillness of motion, continuing exactly as physics allows. And that is another soothing fact worth carrying into sleep, that in space, silence is not emptiness in a lonely sense, but a kind of vast calm, a room so large and still that every movement becomes precise, and every small act of balance becomes meaningful. Soon, the curved edge of the earth begins to brighten again, not quickly, but with a pale silver line that grows into blue, then gold, then a luminous white, and sunrise in orbit arrives like the opening of a secret seam in the fabric of night. The spacecraft, now turned just so, receives the first touch of light on its panels and skin, and the warmth begins again as radiation crossing the vacuum, gentle but real, and the systems aboard quietly respond. Currents flowing, temperatures shifting, sensors waking into a new stretch of day. None of this feels hurried in our relaxing story, because the beauty of rockets is not only that they can rise, but that once they have risen, they can endure through countless careful adjustments, countless small acts of guidance, each one almost invisible, each one keeping the journey smooth. So let your mind follow that example now, making no large effort, asking for no sudden change, only a tiny inward turning toward comfort, a slow alignment with rest, as if some small thruster of calm had nudged your thoughts into a better direction. Let the stars remain steady above. Let the earth roll quietly below. Let the sunlight come and go along the edge of the world, and let the craft continue its soft turning in the dark, showing you that even in the high silence of orbit, peace is made of small corrections, gentle balance, and the patient trust that the night knows how to carry you. As the quiet craft continues its soothing path around the earth, our sleep story drifts into one of the gentlest ideas in all of rocket science, Because once a rocket has reached space, its journey is no longer only about climbing, but about learning the shape of a path. And those paths, called orbits, can be rounder or longer, lower or higher, swifter or slower, each one like a different kind of lullaby, traced through the dark. One of the most relaxing facts about rockets is that there is not just one way to circle a world, but many. And each orbit is a calm agreement between speed and gravity, a kind of celestial understanding in which motion forward and falling inward remain balanced together. Our little craft now glides in a nearly circular orbit, which means its height above the Earth stays almost the same all the way around. And that gives the journey a smooth, repeating rhythm, like the steady breathing of someone who has already begun to fall asleep. But some spacecraft travel in elliptical orbits, and those are softly stretched circles, paths with one side nearer and one side farther from Earth. And there is something lovely about that too, because even in space, not every peaceful journey must be perfectly even in order to be graceful. In an elliptical orbit, the nearest point to Earth is called perigee, and the farthest is called apogee. And these names can rest in the mind like quiet markers on a night road, simple signs for the closest hush and the farthest hush. Another gentle fact is that a spacecraft moves fastest when it is nearest the Earth in its orbit, and slowest when it is farthest away, not because it is trying harder in one place and less in another, but because the rules of motion and gravity create that natural rhythm, a flowing trade between speed and height that happens with serene consistency. So even here, in the black stillness above the world, motion has a kind of breathing to it, a subtle in and out, a faster sweep near the planet, and a slower drift farther away. And it feels wonderfully fitting that the heavens themselves should move with something so much like a sleeping rhythm. Rockets must understand these paths very carefully, because choosing an orbit is like choosing the right tone for a piece of music. And different missions need different kinds of calm. Some satellites remain low, where they circle the Earth more quickly and can see details of clouds, land, oceans, and changing weather, while others go much higher, where they take longer to complete a single trip, but can watch broader regions at once. There are even special orbits designed so that a satellite passes over the same areas under similar lighting conditions, which helps scientists compare images of Earth over time. And that too feels soothing tonight, because it means that even observation can be gentle, regular, and patient. Another sleepy science fact about rockets is that getting to a higher orbit does not simply mean pointing upward and pushing harder. Instead, a spacecraft often uses carefully timed engine burns to reshape its path little by little, adding energy in exactly the right direction so that one quiet curve becomes another. This is one of the most peaceful lessons in simple physics, because it reminds us that great changes in destination can come from brief, well-placed moments of effort rather than constant strain. A small burn at the right time can raise the far side of an orbit, and another at the far side can raise the near side too, until the whole path becomes wider and calmer, like loosening a ribbon into a larger loop. Below the craft, the Earth turns with its own immense patience. Oceans shining faintly, deserts pale under moonlight, mountain ranges hidden under shadow, and cloud bands resting like long white thoughts over the sleeping continents. Up here, there is still almost no air, and so the orbit can remain stable for a long while, though very low spacecraft do eventually meet the thinnest traces of atmosphere, which gently slow them over time. A soft reminder that even near space is not entirely empty. That slowing is called orbital decay, and even the phrase can be heard tonight without worry, because it is simply the gradual lowering of a path when a little drag quietly steals a little energy, not all at once, but grain by grain, like moonlight fading at dawn. Engineers plan for this with care, sometimes lifting an orbit with a short engine burn, sometimes allowing a craft to descend when its work is complete. And in both cases, there is the same calm respect for timing, balance, and graceful endings. For now, though, our craft remains in its steady loop, moving through darkness and light, through the great black hush above and the curved blue tenderness below. And the more we stay with it, the more rockets themselves begin to feel less like machines of noise and more like instruments of rhythm, teaching us about cycles, gentle turns, and the peaceful geometry of motion. So let your thoughts circle softly now, not in restless loops, but in kind and easy ones, the way this spacecraft circles the Earth. Each pass familiar and serene, each curve a little smoother than the last, until the mind no longer feels the need to travel in straight lines at all, and instead accepts the slower wisdom of the orbit, the returning path, the repeating calm, the quiet truth that some of the most beautiful journeys are the ones that keep carrying you round and round through darkness, so soft it almost sings as the craft continues its peaceful circling. This bedtime story arrives at one of the softest and most beautiful truths in sleepy science. Because in space, speed and stillness can live together at the same time, and a rocket or spacecraft may be moving faster than any bird, any wind, any train, and yet from inside, it can feel almost perfectly calm, as though the whole vessel were resting inside a pocket of quiet that travels with it through the dark. That is one of the most relaxing facts about rockets. Simple physics with no stress, because motion does not always feel like rushing. And when movement is smooth and unchanging, the body does not experience it as jarring or loud, but as steady and nearly invisible, like drifting on a very still lake at night with no waves to knock against the hull. Here in orbit, the craft keeps its graceful path because of momentum, that lovely word that means motion already underway, motion that wishes to continue, motion that does not need to be reminded every moment to keep going. On Earth, so many things seem to stop because the world is full of little breaks. Air rubbing against surfaces, wheels meeting roads, shoes meeting ground, water meeting shore. But in orbit, there is almost none of that. And so a spacecraft can glide onward with a kind of effortless patience that feels deeply suited to a gentle bedtime. Another calming fact is that the speed needed for low orbit is great not because space is far in a dramatic sense, but because to keep missing the Earth while falling, a craft must move sideways very quickly, And yet, the wonder of this is not in the number itself, but in the balance it creates, a perfect companionship between gravity drawing inward and motion carrying onward. If the craft were slower, it would descend too soon, and if it were much faster, its path would widen into a different journey. So orbit is a middle way, a quiet agreement, a measured pace that belongs exactly to its height. The earth below turns slowly beneath the window, and from this serene vantage, the planet seems less like a place of deadlines or noise, and more like a lamp gently glowing under layers of blue and silver. The oceans dark and immense, the clouds thin and luminous, the continents resting in broad silence. Sometimes the craft crosses over the night side, where cities appear as fragile constellations on the surface, and sometimes it returns toward day, where the sun draws a pale line over the horizon and expands it into gold. And each pass feels familiar now, like a refrain in a soothing song. In this relaxing story, the rocket that once rose from the quiet field has become something else entirely. Not a machine of ascent, but a patient room of drifting observation. A place where the laws of motion no longer seem severe or abstract, but gentle and almost tender. One especially peaceful fact is that objects inside the craft keep moving just as the craft does. And that is why floating feels natural there, because everything shares the same journey. A pen released from a hand does not crash downward as it would in a quiet bedroom on Earth, but lingers nearby, not because gravity has disappeared, but because pen and hand and spacecraft are all participating in the same free fall. This makes orbit feel less like escaping nature and more like entering one of its quieter moods, a mood where familiar rules still apply, only with fewer interruptions. And perhaps that is why space can sound so calm in a nighttime story, because it does not replace reality with fantasy. It simply removes friction and leaves the underlying patterns more visible. Another gentle truth is that rockets must respect timing above almost everything else, because a small engine burn made at the right moment can reshape an orbit beautifully, while the same burn at the wrong moment does something quite different. And this gives the whole journey a feeling not of force, but of listening. The spacecraft must listen to its position, its path, its speed, its angle to the Earth, its angle to the sun, and then answer with the lightest of touches. This is how precision becomes a kind of calm. This is how science becomes a form of patience. The stars beyond remain steady, no longer twinkling through restless air, and their fixed quiet only deepens the sense that the craft is moving through an enormous stillness rather than across some busy road of the heavens. Even the sunlight, when it arrives, feels orderly, striking the hull, warming one side, leaving the other in cool shadow, while onboard systems quietly manage those differences so balance is kept. There is no need for hurry now, and no need for effort in your own thoughts either. Let the craft show you how smooth a journey can be when everything unnecessary has fallen away. Let momentum carry the story for a while. Let gravity do its patient work below. Let the earth turn under cloud and moonlight. Let the stars remain where they are, And as this sleep story goes on drifting through its calm orbit, let your breathing become just as even, just as unforced, until speed no longer feels like activity, and stillness no longer feels separate from motion, and both of them together become one soft and continuous feeling, a floating rhythm that carries you farther from the day and deeper into rest with every quiet pass around the sleeping world. As the peaceful craft continues its long, circular drifting above the sleeping earth, our gentle bedtime story turns toward another soothing piece of sleepy science. Because even in the calm of orbit, a rocket or spacecraft is never simply wandering. And one of the most relaxing facts about rockets is that guidance is often not a matter of dramatic correction, but of tiny, patient adjustments, little decisions made in silence, so that the journey remains smooth and kind. In the dark above the world, the craft seems almost motionless from within, and yet it is always knowing where it is facing, and where it is going next, as though it were listening to the shape of its own path. This is part of the quiet beauty of spaceflight, that the most important movements are sometimes the smallest ones. A brief pulse from a thruster, a careful turn of a wheel inside the craft, a slow reorientation that changes everything without ever disturbing the peace. In this sleep story, imagine that the vessel is gliding through a region of soft darkness above the night side of Earth, with cloud tops silvered by moonlight and oceans below like long fields of velvet. And inside the craft, there is only the hush of systems doing exactly what they were designed to do. A guidance system, after all, is simply a way for the spacecraft to compare where it is with where it wishes to be. And that comparison can feel wonderfully restful tonight, because it is not made in panic or noise, but in calm measurement, as if the craft were taking a slow breath and deciding, with perfect gentleness, to shift by the smallest possible amount. Another simple fact about rockets is that they carry instruments to sense motion and direction, and these may include gyroscopes and star trackers, both of which sound almost magical in the dark, though their work is beautifully practical. A gyroscope helps a craft understand changes in its orientation, while a star tracker looks outward and recognizes the fixed patterns of stars. Using them as quiet points of reference in the great black stillness, there's something deeply comforting in that image. A machine traveling high above the world and still finding its way by the ancient lights, not unlike a sleepy traveler who glances once at the moon and somehow feels less alone. The stars do not guide with words, and the spacecraft does not need them to. It only needs their steady positions, their calm refusal to hurry, their patient presence against the dark. The craft now turns by the smallest degree, almost too slowly to notice, and this small turn brings a sensor into a better angle, or a panel more fully toward the sun waiting just beyond the Earth's curve. And here is another gentle lesson from simple physics. Because tiny changes made early often prevent larger changes later. It is such a kind principle, and one that belongs beautifully in a relaxing story, because it suggests that peace is often maintained through modest care rather than heroic effort. Below, the planet continues to roll in muted blues and blacks, and the atmosphere traces its fine luminous line along the horizon, so thin and delicate that it seems impossible such a slender veil could hold all weather, all breath, all birdsong. And yet it does, wrapping the world in just enough softness for life. The spacecraft, moving above that thin shell, knows nothing of wind on its outer skin now, almost nothing of drag. And so its path remains pure and uninterrupted, except when it chooses to alter it. And that choice is always deliberate, always measured, always calm. In this nighttime story, the computer aboard is not cold or severe in feeling, but patient, like a quiet librarian of motion, keeping track of position, speed, angle, and timing, always aware that the right second for a tiny burn matters more than any amount of unnecessary force. So a thruster may fire for only a moment, barely more than a whisper in the long silence of space. And that whisper can raise one side of the orbit, adjust a rendezvous path, refine an alignment, or preserve the elegant balance of the mission. It is astonishing and also deeply restful that so much can be accomplished by so little when the timing is right. This is part of what makes rocket science feel so serene tonight, because it is not only about power, but about precision, not only about ascent, but about listening to the exact shape of motion and responding with grace. Imagine now that the craft passes gently out of darkness and toward another sunrise, and the first light touches one edge of the window like warm silk laid across cool glass. The stars nearest the brightening horizon begin to fade, though the deeper ones remain, and the earth below shifts from black to blue to white along its rim. The guidance system has done its work so quietly that the dawn seems to arrive without transition at all. And that is the mood of this chapter, this calming narration for deep sleep, that the finest guidance is the kind you barely feel, the kind that keeps the journey true without ever troubling your rest. Let your thoughts be guided in the same way now, not by force, not by urgency, but by tiny and almost invisible adjustments toward comfort. Let one thought drift aside. Let one muscle unclench. Let one breath lengthen. Let one more layer of the day fall away like an empty stage, no longer needed. And as the quiet rocket continues onward, gently corrected, softly aligned, and perfectly at ease in the velvet dark, let your own mind take the hint from the stars and move only as much as is necessary to settle deeper, softer, and farther into sleep. Now, as the spacecraft continues its calm and circular drifting above the sleeping world, this gentle bedtime story turns toward one of the loveliest ideas in rocket science. Because every orbit is a kind of promise between speed and gravity, and that promise can be kept, widened, or, in very special cases, softly left behind. One of the most relaxing facts about rockets is that there is a speed so meaningful that, if a craft were to reach it in the right way, it would no longer remain bound to Earth in the same old loop, but could drift onward into deeper space. And this is called escape velocity, a phrase that may sound hurried by day, but tonight can be heard as something quieter, more like a threshold of release than a burst of urgency. Escape velocity does not mean a rocket tears away in a single wild motion and never again feels gravity, because gravity still reaches outward, patiently and invisibly, across very great distances. Instead, it means the craft has gained enough energy that Earth can no longer draw it back into a closed return path. There is something deeply peaceful in that idea, because it reminds us that leaving is not always a matter of force alone, but of having just enough to continue without needing to come back to where you began. Our own craft is not yet leaving Earth behind in that way, and that is part of the calm of this chapter, because we are only resting beside the concept, touching it lightly, like fingertips brushing the surface of cool water from the window. The planet below remains broad and blue-black, with cloud bands drifting like pale wool, and the edge of the atmosphere shining as a thin, tender arc. The spacecraft glides onward in the same patient orbit. And yet, in the mind, we can imagine what it would mean to go a little farther, to let one carefully timed engine burn, add not just enough speed to stay around the Earth, but enough to stretch the path outward into a long ellipse, and then farther still into a path that does not close. Another soft fact about rockets is that space missions often unfold through these gentle changes of shape rather than sudden leaps, because a spacecraft can move from one orbit to another by adding energy at the right moment, and each new path becomes a quiet sentence in the longer grammar of motion. Engineers do not simply ask whether a craft can go fast, but when, where, and in what direction it should become faster, because timing in space is as important as strength. That is such a soothing lesson to linger with tonight, that the universe rewards not only power, but placement, not only effort, but rhythm. If a spacecraft wishes to reach the moon, visit another planet, or travel outward into the wider dark, it often begins by circling Earth, and then waiting for the right moment to leave. And the leaving itself is less like an emotional farewell, and more like a tide changing, a current of motion opening at exactly the proper hour. In this relaxing story, imagine that possibility as a silver path slowly extending beyond the round cradle of low orbit, not because anything has become louder, but because the equations of motion have quietly made room for a larger journey. Even the word trajectory can sound soft when heard at bedtime, for a trajectory is simply the shape a moving thing follows through space and time, a curve written by speed, direction, and gravity together. Some trajectories return, some circle, some stretch wide and then close again, and some, if given enough energy, open like long ribbons into the black, carrying a spacecraft farther from Earth with each passing hour. Yet even then, the craft would not be flying through resistance the way a bird moves through air. It would be coasting, mostly, resting inside momentum, guided by the initial gift of its engines and the continuing influence of gravity from worlds near and far. This is one of the gentlest truths in all of sleepy science, that so much of space travel is not continual pushing, but wise beginning. Below us, night still covers much of the Earth, and city lights gleam like quiet embers on the turning surface. Above us, the stars remain clear and unwinking, steady in a darkness too vast to be empty, because it is filled with law, with distance, with faint sunlight, with silent fields of force, with all the soft architecture of the universe. The spacecraft keeps its orbit for now, and perhaps that is the kindest choice for this nighttime story, because orbit itself is already a form of belonging, a calm middle ground between the home below and the unknown beyond. Still, it is comforting to know that rockets are capable of more than ascent alone. They are not only ladders into the sky, but patient tools for shaping paths, for negotiating with gravity, for deciding how close to remain and how far to wander. So as this chapter settles around you, let the idea of escape velocity become not a sharp or restless thing, but a very quiet image of enoughness, enough speed, enough timing, enough trust in the path ahead. Let the spacecraft continue circling the Earth, while the larger possibility rests nearby like a distant doorway left gently open. And let your own mind, without trying to solve anything at all, drift in that same atmosphere of calm potential, knowing it does not need to go farther tonight, knowing it is enough simply to float, to breathe, and to be carried softly onward by the slow and patient motion of the dark as our quiet craft continues its smooth and untroubled path around the Earth. This gentle bedtime story begins to widen once more, not into anything hurried or bright, but into a softer horizon of thought, because one of the most relaxing facts about rockets is that they do not always travel in direct lines from one place to another. And often, the calmest journeys through space are the ones shaped by curves, by patience, and by a respectful listening to gravity itself. Tonight, from the stillness of orbit, we drift toward the dreamy idea of the moon, not as a destination of noise or urgency, but as a pale companion hanging peacefully beyond the atmosphere, a quiet lantern of rock and shadow that has watched Earth sleep for ages beyond counting. To reach the moon, a spacecraft does not simply point upward and rush forward as though space were an empty road. Instead, it waits in orbit, gathers the right speed in the right direction, and then lets its path stretch outward into a longer curve, a path that opens away from the Earth like a ribbon being slowly unspooled into the dark. This is one of the loveliest parts of sleepy rocket science, because it reminds us that even a voyage to another world begins with timing, restraint, and the art of leaving gently. The craft below us is still circling, still carried by its quiet balance of momentum and gravity. But now, we imagine what happens when an engine burns at just the right moment, adding enough speed to lengthen the orbit until its farthest reach rises toward the moon's distance. That burn has a formal name in spaceflight, yet tonight it can simply be felt as a careful deepening of the journey, a soft extension of what was already in motion. Another calming fact is that the moon is not standing still somewhere above the Earth waiting to be approached like a lamp on a table. It is moving too, faithfully circling our world. And so any spacecraft heading there must aim not for where the moon is, but for where it will be when the spacecraft arrives. There is something wonderfully restful in that thought, because it means successful travel in space is not about chasing, but about understanding rhythm, like knowing when to step into a slow dance so that you meet your partner exactly where the music carries them. The earth remains broad below, now more distant in feeling than in sight. Its weather folded into swirls, its oceans dark and glassy, its thin atmosphere shining like a faint blue breath around the whole sleeping globe. And above that tender veil, the spacecraft is free to follow the larger geometry of the night as it begins to stretch its path outward in our imagination. Gravity continues its patient work, not only from Earth, but also, faintly and steadily, from the moon. This too is among the most peaceful facts about rockets. That space is never a place of pure isolation or aimless drifting, because every object is quietly connected to other objects by invisible pulls, and a spacecraft moves through a web of influences that are gentle, exact, and always present. The farther it travels from Earth, the more the Earth's hold softens, and the more the moon's influence begins to matter, until the journey becomes a kind of transfer of attention between two worlds. Scientists and engineers study these balances with extraordinary care. But here in this relaxing story, we can picture it simply as a silver boat leaving one tide and entering another. A spacecraft bound for the moon does not need to keep its engines roaring the whole way. In truth, much of the journey is coasting, and coasting remains one of the most beautiful bedtime words in all of rocket physics, because it means that once the path has been shaped correctly, motion itself carries the craft onward through the dark. There's no wind to resist it, no road beneath it, no need for constant effort, only the long reward of a well-chosen beginning. The stars remain still beyond the window, clear and unwavering, and the moon ahead grows just a little more real in the mind. Not yet large, not yet near, but no longer merely a distant ornament of the sky. Its pale plains, its old craters, its quiet mountains of dust and stone all seem to wait in profound silence. And the spacecraft, tiny by comparison, approaches not with conquest in its heart, but with exquisite attention to motion, angle, and time. Even here, simple physics remains our soft companion. Speed changes distance. Gravity bends paths. Mass resists motion. Energy must be spent wisely. Nothing in these truths is harsh when told slowly enough. In fact, they begin to sound almost kind, like old rules that have never failed anyone who took the time to listen. So as this nighttime story unfolds, let yourself follow the silver arc outward from the Earth. Not all the way to arrival, not yet, but into that dreamy middle region between worlds, where a rocket becomes a drifting promise, where the moon becomes a patient destination, and where the whole universe feels less like a place of extremes and more like a quiet arrangement of curves, timings, and soft, invisible hands. Let your thoughts travel only that far tonight, just far enough to feel the Earth loosen slightly below, just far enough to notice the moon waiting ahead, and just far enough to understand that even the longest journeys through space can begin in stillness, continue in balance, and carry their travelers forward with such calm precision that sleep itself might borrow their path and glide beside them. Now the spacecraft has begun to drift beyond the close and familiar cradle of Earth, And this gentle sleep story enters one of the calmest regions of all, the long, quiet middle, where a rocket no longer seems to be climbing at all, and not yet arriving either, but simply traveling with a deep and peaceful certainty through the dark between worlds. This is one of the most relaxing facts about rockets, because after the important burn that shapes the journey, there can be long stretches where almost nothing appears to happen. And yet, everything is still unfolding exactly as it should. In this bedtime story, the engines are silent again, and silence itself becomes part of the narration, a soft companion, a kind of invisible blanket spread across the path ahead. The earth is still behind, luminous and blue, though smaller now in feeling, and the moon is still ahead, pale and patient. And between them lies a region so still that motion seems to become a private thought rather than an event. One of the gentlest lessons in simple physics is that a rocket does not need to keep pushing forever in order to keep going. Once it has been given the right speed in the right direction, it can coast for a very long time, and coasting is such a sleepy and beautiful word because it suggests trust, ease, and the quiet continuation of something already well begun. So the craft glides onward through the velvet dark, held not by effort, but by momentum, the soft persistence of motion already underway. Around it, there is no air to rustle against its surface, no wind to press at its sides, no weather to interrupt the path, only distance, darkness, and the patient curves written by gravity. Earth's pull has not vanished, but it has softened, and the moon's influence has begun to matter a little more, and the spacecraft moves through that invisible balance, the way a leaf might drift between two slow currents in a still pond, not confused, not lost, but gently guided by forces too quiet to see. In this relaxing story, that hidden guidance feels deeply comforting because it means the universe is not empty in a lonely way. It is structured. It is orderly. It is full of quiet relationships. Even far from home, the rocket is still in conversation with the worlds around it. Another peaceful fact about rockets is that when a journey is long and carefully planned, only the smallest corrections are often needed along the way. A tiny pulse from a thruster at the right moment can refine the path by just enough, like the faintest adjustment of a blanket near the shoulder, or the lightest turn of a pillow before sleep deepens. The craft does not need great force now. It only needs attentiveness. It only needs to listen to where it is and where it is going, then answer with a whisper. Below and behind, the earth continues turning in its own vast calm, with oceans, clouds, deserts, forests, and sleeping cities all wrapped inside a thin atmosphere that from here looks more delicate than ever. Just a fine luminous seam around a blue-dark sphere. Head, the moon seems brighter against the black, though still small, a lantern hung far down a quiet corridor. And somewhere inside this silent vessel, all the careful systems of spaceflight continue their patient work, measuring, adjusting, preserving warmth, preserving power, preserving orientation, so that the whole voyage feels less like a rush towards somewhere and more like a long and soothing act of balance. In a nighttime story such as this one, even the idea of navigation becomes gentle. The craft does not argue with the darkness. It does not force the stars aside. It simply knows itself in relation to them, borrowing calm from their steadiness, comparing its path to their fixed patterns, and letting ancient points of light help keep a modern machine true. There's something so reassuring in that image. A rocket crossing the deep in silence, while the stars remain constant around it, as if the oldest lights in the sky were offering quiet approval. Another simple truth from sleepy science is that distance in space can be so great that change often arrives slowly to the eye. A world may remain small for hours, and then, little by little, begin to swell. And this makes the journey feel less like leaping and more like dreaming, where one scene gradually becomes another without any harsh edge between them. So the moon now grows almost imperceptibly larger, and its pale surface begins to feel less like a smooth glow and more like a resting place of plains and craters and long silent shadows. Yet, we do not hurry there. We let the approach remain slow. We let the calm remain complete. We let the rocket continue this gentle bedtime passage through the middle distance, where the great lesson is not speed, but serenity. And perhaps that is why this sleep story settles so softly around the mind, because it shows that some of the most extraordinary journeys are carried not by constant excitement, but by quiet preparation, quiet balance, quiet patience, and long intervals of trust. So let your thoughts move as this craft moves now, with no strain and no need to push, simply carried by the momentum of rest, passing through the silent dark between one thought and the next. While Earth glows faintly behind you, the moon waits softly ahead of you, and the whole universe seems to say, in the gentlest possible voice, that it is safe to drift, safe to soften, safe to let the night carry you farther into deep sleep. As the spacecraft continues its long and peaceful drifting through the dark between worlds, our sleep story arrives at a new and gentle threshold, because the moon, which once seemed like a small pale lantern waiting far ahead, now begins to feel a little nearer, a little rounder, a little more present. And one of the most relaxing facts about rockets is that arrival in space is rarely sudden, but instead unfolds as a slow and graceful change in what matters most. For while Earth's pull has guided the craft for so much of the journey, the moon's gravity is now beginning to speak more clearly, not with any noise or urgency, but with the soft authority of a second tide drawing near. In this bedtime story, the spacecraft does not race toward the moon as though chasing something bright and distant, but rather eases into a new relationship with it, letting the invisible geometry of space reshape the path a little more with every quiet hour. Behind the craft, Earth has become smaller, still beautiful, still luminous, still wrapped in that fine blue thread of atmosphere, yet now more like a memory resting gently in the background of the sky. Ahead, the moon grows more textured in the mind, its pale plains no longer just a smooth shine, but broad regions of ancient dust and stone, its darker patches like pools of shadowed calm, its crater rims catching light in quiet crescents. Another soothing fact from simple rocket science is that when a spacecraft approaches the moon, it must be very careful not merely to arrive there, but to arrive in the right way, right speed and the right direction. Because if it comes too swiftly, it may pass by. And if it wishes to stay, it must allow the moon to gather it into orbit with the help of a gentle and carefully timed engine burn. There's something so beautifully tender in that idea that even here, after all this distance, success still depends not on force alone, but on timing, listening, and balance. So in this relaxing story, the craft now begins to prepare for that subtle change, and preparation itself feels calming because nothing is rushed, nothing is startled, nothing is left to panic or chance. The guidance systems remain patient. The orientation remains steady. The small interior of the craft stays hushed and dim, as though even the instruments understand that this part of the journey belongs to quiet concentration. Outside the window, the stars remain clear and unwinking, but the moon now fills more of the view. And as it does, the darkness around it becomes somehow deeper and softer, like velvet folded around a pearl. One of the loveliest facts about gravity is that it can shape motion without ever touching what it moves. And here, in the silent approach, that truth feels almost like a lullaby, because the spacecraft is already being guided by something it cannot see, pulled not harshly, but steadily, invited into a curve that will soon become a circle around this patient world. The craft may need a brief engine firing to slow itself relative to the moon, and slowing down in order to stay is one of the gentlest lessons of all, because it reminds us that sometimes the way to arrive somewhere peacefully is not by adding more speed, but by releasing some of it, softening the motion just enough for belonging to begin. If the engine burns at the right moment, the long path from Earth can be reshaped into lunar orbit. And orbit here, just as around Earth, is another quiet agreement between falling and moving forward, another form of balance. Only now the balance belongs to a smaller, older, more silent companion world. In this nighttime story, you might imagine the spacecraft gliding over the moon's far side, where sunlight falls low across cratered highlands and long shadows stretch like dark silk over the pale ground. And because the moon has no thick atmosphere to blur the light, the contrast between brightness and shadow feels crisp and pure, yet still peaceful, like clean lines in a half-remembered dream. The surface below is still, untouched by wind, untouched by rain, and this too is restful to imagine, a place where footprints may linger for ages, where dust settles and simply remains, where time itself seems to move in a slower register. Another simple fact about rockets is that every destination asks for its own style of care, and the same spacecraft that rose from Earth with powerful ascent now depends on the smallest calculations, the gentlest corrections, the most exact understanding of motion, as though the whole journey has been teaching the same lesson over and over in different forms, that the universe responds beautifully to precision offered in calm. So let the moon grow larger in your mind without ever becoming loud. Let the craft turn just slightly. Let the engine, when it must, speak only briefly. Let the path bend. Let the pull deepen. Let the silver vessel ease itself into the quiet welcome of lunar space, where nothing needs to be hurried, and every movement feels softened by distance and shadow. And as this chapter drifts around you, let your own thoughts begin to settle the same way, not stopping all at once, but gradually entering a new orbit of rest, slower, softer, quieter than the one before, until even your breathing feels lunar, pale, and untroubled, and the night around you becomes a wide and silent sky in which it is perfectly safe to float. Now, in this gentle sleep story, the long silver path from Earth begins to soften into a new and quieter shape, because the spacecraft, having drifted so patiently through the dark between worlds, is now ready to settle into a calm circle above the moon. And one of the most relaxing facts about rockets is that arriving somewhere in space often means slowing down at exactly the right time, not to stop, but to belong. The moon fills more of the window now, pale and still, its ancient surface brushed with long shadows and smooth plains of dust. And the spacecraft turns with exquisite care, so that its engine points in just the right direction for a brief and measured burn. This moment is not loud in our bedtime story. It is not urgent. It is simply precise, and precision, when wrapped in darkness and silence, can feel as soothing as the slow straightening of a blanket before deep sleep. The engine glows for a little while, and because it fires opposite the direction of travel, the craft begins to lose some of its speed relative to the moon, which is one of the loveliest pieces of simple physics in all of rocket science. Because sometimes a rocket uses thrust not to race ahead, but to ease itself into a gentler path. That is how lunar orbit begins, with a soft subtraction, a graceful giving back of speed, just enough for the moon's gravity to gather the spacecraft into a repeating curve, rather than letting it drift onward into the farther dark. Outside the window, crater rims shine like quiet silver crescents, and the wide gray plains, called Maria, stretch like frozen lakes under the angled sun. These darker plains were formed long ago by ancient lava flows that cooled and settled into vast, smooth regions. And even that fact feels peaceful tonight, because it means the moon carries old stillness in its very skin, broad resting places made from warmth that quieted ages ago. As the spacecraft completes its burn, the new orbit begins to reveal itself, not as a line you can see drawn in space, but as a feeling of repeated return, a promise that this path will carry the craft around the moon again and again, with the same serene logic that once carried it around Earth. Another calming fact about rockets is that every orbit depends on the body being orbited. And because the moon is smaller than Earth and its gravity is gentler, a spacecraft can circle it at different speeds and heights than it would back home, always listening to the same universal rules, but hearing them in a softer voice. In this nighttime story, the spacecraft now passes over the near side, where the Earth hangs in the black sky beyond the lunar horizon, blue and white and impossibly tender. A bright round home suspended above the gray silence. There's something deeply comforting in that image, because it makes the whole journey feel held together. Earth behind, and yet still visible. Moon below, and patient. Spacecraft between them, like a small thought, drifting through an ancient conversation. One more gentle fact from sleepy science is that the moon has almost no atmosphere to speak of, which means there is no weather there in the earthly sense. No wind to brush the dust into patterns. No rain to soften the crater edges. No clouds to hide the stars. The surface remains exposed, clear, and enduring. And light falls across it with crisp honesty, making the border between brightness and shadow feel especially clean. Yet, even that sharpness becomes soft in the telling, because the shadows are not frightening here, only cool, quiet, and old. Like folds in dark linen, the spacecraft glides onward. And now that the engine is silent again, orbit becomes once more a form of peaceful coasting, motion continuing without strain, guided by gravity and momentum in perfect, quiet partnership. That is one of the best bedtime lessons rockets can offer. That after the important moment of effort, there can be long stretches where everything simply continues, because it has been set in motion with care. Perhaps that is why this relaxing story feels so suitable for a gentle bedtime, because it reminds you that not every part of a journey needs to be active, and not every transition needs to be loud. Sometimes the most meaningful change happens in a small burn, a tiny turn, a subtle release of speed, and then the new path carries you by itself. Below, the moon's far side turns into view, rougher in places, more heavily cratered, untouched by oceans, untouched by breeze, untouched by all the soft, moving things of earth. It is a landscape of still memory, where time seems to sit quietly on the ground. The craft passes above it with complete calm, and inside, everything remains hushed, the instruments steady, the orientation true, the window full of pale light and black velvet beyond. So let your own thoughts enter this lunar orbit now, not clinging to the day behind you, not rushing toward anything ahead, but simply circling in a quieter way than before, slower and softer with each pass. Let the moon below become a peaceful anchor for the mind. Let the earth in the distance become a kind lantern of belonging. Let the laws of motion feel less like rules and more like lullabies, gently guiding everything into place. And as this calming narration continues, let the spacecraft show you how beautiful it can be to arrive by easing, to settle by slowing, to begin a whole new chapter of the journey, not with noise, but with a pale and perfect curve above a silent world. Now that the spacecraft has settled into its pale and peaceful circle above the moon, this sleep story drifts toward another of the most relaxing facts about rockets. Because not every journey through space is about rising higher and higher, and sometimes the next beautiful step is a gentle descent, a careful lowering into a softer path, as if the craft were leaning closer to the silver stillness below in order to understand it better. The moon turns beneath the window with deep calm, its plains and crater fields resting in long ribbons of shadow. And from this quiet orbit, it becomes easier to feel how gravity is not only something that pulls, but something that shapes, something that invites, something that writes curves into motion with invisible and patient hands. One of the loveliest truths in simple physics is that falling does not always look like dropping, because in orbit, the spacecraft is already falling around the moon. And if it wishes to come nearer, it does not simply point downward in a hurried way, but instead adjusts its path with the smallest and gentlest use of thrust, allowing one part of the orbit to dip lower until the whole silver journey begins to draw closer to the silent surface. That is such a calming idea for a bedtime story, because it means approach is not a rush, but a refinement, not a leap, but a soft reshaping of what is already underway. The engine or thrusters speak only briefly, like a whisper folded into darkness, and the spacecraft responds by changing its orbit a little, not in any alarming way, but with the same graceful obedience to motion that has guided it from Earth to here. Now the near side of the moon seems less like a distant image and more like a patient landscape, ancient and powder soft, full of long settled dust that has never known wind, never known rain, never known the busy erosion of rivers or weather, only the slow language of light and shadow crossing stone. Another peaceful fact about rockets is that landing on the moon is different from landing on Earth, because there is almost no atmosphere to help slow a spacecraft down, no broad blanket of air for wings or parachutes to press against. And so rockets themselves must provide the careful braking needed for descent. Yet even that fact can be heard softly tonight, because it means the craft must do what it has always done best, which is use directed thrust with patience and precision, answering gravity not with struggle, but with balance. In this relaxing story, the descent begins high above the surface, where the curve of the moon still feels grand, and the craters still look like pale bowls filled with shadow. And little by little, the spacecraft lowers its path, each orbit carrying it closer, each pass revealing finer details in the dust-gray world below. Some craters are round and smooth-edged. Some overlap one another like quiet rings in still water. Some hold darkness on one side and silver light on the other. And the Maria, those wide plains of ancient lava, stretch like sleeping seas that hardened long ago, and then simply remained. The more closely the craft approaches, the more the moon seems to welcome it through silence alone. There are no storms here to interrupt the landing, no winds to buffet the hull, no rustling air, only gravity, inertia, and the delicate judgment of timing. One of the most soothing lessons in rocket science is that slowing down can be an active and beautiful thing, because in space, a vehicle often fires its engines not to go faster, but to remove just enough speed for a safer path. And tonight, that lesson feels almost like advice for the heart, a reminder that arriving gently often means releasing momentum rather than adding to it. The spacecraft turns again, engine angled with exquisite care, and another brief burn eases the orbit lower still, until the surface begins to fill the window in broader and calmer detail. Boulders become visible as tiny shadows. Crater rims become long arcs of pale dust. The horizon feels nearer now, and Earth, once broad below, now hangs in the black sky like a distant blue lantern, a quiet reminder of oceans, clouds, and sleep-filled homes far away. Still, the craft does not hurry. It listens to its altitude. It listens to its speed. It listens to the moon's softer gravity, which is gentler than Earth's and allows motion to feel somehow lighter, more spacious, more suspended. Even the thought of touching down becomes becomes serene when told this way, because a lunar landing is, at heart, a long conversation between descent and restraint, between downward pull and upward thrust, until the two are balanced so finely that the final approach may feel almost like settling a feather onto a windowsill. In this nighttime story, we need not land fully just yet. It is enough to remain in this exquisite nearing, this silver lowering through quiet lunar space, where every adjustment is small, every fact is soft, and every movement seems wrapped in velvet darkness. So let your thoughts descend in the same peaceful manner now, not all at once, not in a sudden drop, but by gentle degrees, one layer of wakefulness easing below another, one thought settling under the next, until your mind feels like this quiet craft above the moon, moving closer and closer to rest through balance, patience, and the kindest possible use of motion. Now, in this gentle bedtime story, the quiet descent through the moon's soft gravity becomes even more delicate, because the spacecraft is nearing the moment when motion must be shaped with the greatest kindness of all. And one of the most relaxing facts about rockets is that a landing is not really a sudden arrival, but a very patient exchange between falling and slowing, between gravity drawing downward and engines answering upward in just the right measure. Below the window, the lunar surface has grown calm and detailed, a pale expanse of dust, small ridges, scattered stones, and old crater rims resting in stillness that has lasted for ages. And because the moon has almost no atmosphere, nothing here is blurred by wind or cloud. Nothing is softened by rain, and so every shadow lies quietly where the sunlight has placed it. The spacecraft continues to lower itself, not by rushing toward the ground, but by carefully reducing the sideways speed that once kept it circling above. And this is one of the loveliest pieces of simple physics in all of sleepy science. Because to land on a world, you must not only come down, you must also gradually stop moving across it too quickly. In orbit, the craft was always falling around the moon, missing the surface through forward motion. But now that forward motion is being gently taken away, little by little, by soft engine burns that feel less like commands and more like whispers. This makes the whole descent feel deeply peaceful, like loosening a ribbon knot by knot, or setting down a lantern so slowly that its light never flickers. The engines beneath the craft glow with steady purpose, and though engines are often imagined as loud or fierce, tonight they are only instruments of balance, quiet helpers that allow the spacecraft to hover between too much falling and too much speed, until the moon's pull and the rocket's upward thrust begin to speak to each other in a calm and measured language. Another soothing fact about rockets is that thrust can be controlled, not simply turned on or off in a harsh way. And this means a landing engine can adjust how strongly it pushes, giving just enough force for each moment of descent. There is something profoundly restful in that idea, because it means the craft does not need to guess wildly. It can listen to its height, listen to its speed, listen to the changing nearness of the ground, and answer each change with precision. Now the surface below seems to rise with exquisite slowness, and what once looked like broad gray plains from orbit begins, to reveal smaller textures, gentle undulations in the dust, long, low ridges, little hollows where old impacts once settled into silence. If there were air here, there might be rustling, buffeting, whether the movement of leaves or the brushing of wind over stone. But on the moon, there is none of that. The stillness remains complete, and that stillness is part of what makes this nighttime story feel so calm. Because even the approach of a spacecraft seems to happen inside a world that has chosen quiet as its oldest habit. The craft turns slightly, aligning itself more perfectly above a safe resting place. And this too is among the most comforting facts in rocket science, that landing is as much about guidance as it is about power. The right spot must be chosen. The angle must remain true. The descent must stay slow and even. Tiny adjustments from small thrusters help the craft keep its posture balanced, like a sleeping bird adjusting its wings before settling fully onto a branch. Beneath, a faint cloud of lunar dust may soon begin to stir where the engine plume touches the ground. And even this can be imagined softly, not as a storm, but as a pale veil lifting and curling in the low gravity, each grain moving in silence across a place that has known almost no motion for a very long time. One more gentle truth about the moon is that its gravity is much weaker than Earth's. And because of that, landing can feel more measured, more suspended, as though every last meter downward has been stretched into a slower, dreamlike form. The spacecraft descends through those final moments with extraordinary patience. Height becomes smaller, shadows sharpen, the dust grows nearer. The engines continue their careful reply to gravity, never too much, never too little, until the last trace of downward speed becomes almost nothing at all. And then, without any need for drama, without a jolt in the telling, the landing legs meet the powdery ground with the gentlest touch, as if the craft had merely remembered where it meant to rest. This is one of the most beautiful bedtime lessons rockets can offer, that even after a journey across darkness, balance still matters most at the end, and the softest arrival is often the most precise. Now, the engines fall silent, the dust settles, the moon remains vast and pale beyond the window, and Earth shines far above the horizon like a small blue lamp left burning in a distant room. The rocket that once stood in a quiet field beneath the evening sky has come all this way not through hurry, but through timing, patience, fuel, gravity, momentum, and countless small acts of guidance. And all of those facts, when told slowly enough, become less like mechanics and more like lullabies. So let this gentle landing settle into your thoughts as softly as the spacecraft has settled into the lunar dust. And let your own mind come to rest in the same way, with no sudden stop, no hard edge, only a gradual easing into stillness, until the whole wide journey of the night feels complete enough to hold you, quiet enough to comfort you, and calm enough to carry you the rest of the way into deep sleep. Now that the spacecraft has come to rest upon the moon's pale and powdery plain, this gentle sleep story enters an even softer chapter, because one of the most relaxing facts about rockets is that after all the careful motion of ascent, orbit, transfer, descent, and landing, there comes a moment when the machine simply becomes still. And in that stillness, every earlier burst of effort seems to melt into silence, like ripples fading from a midnight lake outside the window. The dust has already begun to settle back into perfect calm, and the landing legs stand lightly upon the surface, as if they were trying not to disturb the ancient quiet more than necessary. The engines, which guided the spacecraft down with such patient precision, are no longer speaking at all, and yet their work remains visible in the delicate patterns left in the lunar soil below. Another soothing fact about rockets is that engines do not only create motion, they also create heat. And when a rocket rests after flight, that heat slowly spreads through its metal and then escapes away, not through air, because there is almost none here, but mostly by radiating outward into the surrounding dark. This is one of those simple pieces of physics that feels especially lovely at bedtime, because it means even warmth leaves gently in space, drifting away in silence rather than being rushed off by any wind. The spacecraft now feels like a small lantern set down in a vast gray garden, holding a little stored warmth inside, while the moon all around it remains cool, still, and unhurried. Beneath the landing legs lies regolith, the fine dust and broken stone that covers so much of the lunar surface. And this dust is another wonderfully sleepy science fact, because it was made not by rain or rivers or forests falling and returning to soil, but mostly by countless tiny impacts over immense stretches of time, each one quietly chipping, cracking, and softening the rock into powder. There's something deeply restful in that image, not because of the impacts themselves, but because of the long patience involved, the sense that the moon's surface became what it is through ages so vast that even change learned how to whisper. The dust does not cling to grass here, because there is no grass, and it does not blow into drifts the way desert sand might on Earth, because there is no real wind. And so the marks made by landing can remain for a very long time, resting exactly where they were placed. One of the loveliest truths in this nighttime story is that the moon keeps its history in stillness. A track can last, a shadow can stay sharp, a slope can remain untouched for ages, and because gravity here is gentler than on Earth, everything seems to belong to a slower and softer rhythm, as if even downwardness had become more patient. Inside the craft, all is quiet order. Tanks are lighter than before, fuel partly spent in the careful descent, yet what remains rests in calm balance. The walls hold their shape. The instruments continue their quiet watching. The power systems keep their steady pulse. This too is part of the beauty of rockets, that they are not only made for motion, but also for surviving the pause after motion, the part of the journey where systems must preserve warmth, power, and peace. If the sunlight touches the outer hull, one side may brighten, while another side remains in shadow. And so, the craft continues its silent conversation with temperature, using insulation, coatings, and thoughtful design to keep its inside world balanced. Another gentle fact from simple physics is that in places without much atmosphere, the difference between sunlight and shadow can be very great, because air is not there to soften and distribute heat in the familiar way. Yet even that feels peaceful tonight, because the spacecraft has come prepared, just as it came prepared for ascent, for orbit, for the long coast through darkness, and for this hush of arrival beyond the window. Earth hangs above the horizon like a blue-white bedside lamp left glowing in a distant room. And from here, it no longer feels like a busy world of clocks and errands and unfinished thoughts, but something whole and tender, a calm sphere wrapped in cloud, carrying oceans, forests, mountains, and sleeping cities. It is comforting to remember that rockets allow such a view not by breaking the laws of nature, but by listening to them so carefully that motion becomes a form of understanding. Every stage of the journey depended on balance, on giving hot gas one direction and receiving movement in another, on carrying fuel, managing mass, respecting gravity, and shaping speed into curves gentle enough to become orbits and descents. Now all of those facts come to rest together here, in one silent machine, resting on one silent plane. So let this landed craft become your image for the night, a quiet vessel resting on silver dust, its engines asleep, its warmth slowly radiating into blackness, its landing legs settled, its window full of pale ground and faraway earth. Let your thoughts settle as the dust has settled. Let your breathing cool and soften as the engine has cooled and softened. Let every small effort of the day drift outward and away, leaving only the most peaceful part behind, until your mind feels like this moonlit plain, wide and undisturbed. And sleep arrives not as something sudden, but as a soft and natural landing into stillness. And now, dear listener, this gentle bedtime story begins its final quiet drifting, for the rocket has completed its long and patient work, and the silver craft rests peacefully on the moon beneath a sky so still and dark that even silence seems to have fallen asleep inside it. And from this place of soft arrival, we can let everything become slower, looser, dimmer, and more distant, until the whole journey feels less like a story still being told, and more like a dream already settling around you. The pale dust beyond the window no longer needs to be explored, because it has already given us its calm, and the engine beneath the craft no longer needs to speak, because it has already answered gravity with perfect gentleness. And now all that remains is the deep quiet that follows understanding, the kind of quiet that comes when nothing more is required. Far above the horizon, Earth glows like a small blue lamp in a darkened room, lovely and far away. And even that soft light seems content not to brighten the scene too much, only to remain there as a tender reminder that home continues turning in its own calm rhythm, while you rest here in imagination, wrapped in this relaxing story, this nighttime story, this gentle bedtime, carried all the way from a sleeping field on Earth to a silver plain beneath the patient stars. The craft is still now, completely still, and one of the most beautiful feelings in all of sleepy science is the feeling of a journey coming to rest without any harsh edge, without any sudden stop, without anything breaking the softness of the dark. Everything that once moved has found its place. The fuel that lifted the rocket has been spent where it was needed. The stages that helped along the way have done their quiet work, the guidance, the turning, the coasting, the careful slowing, all of it has led here, to this hush so complete that even thoughts begin to settle like fine lunar dust. Perhaps you can feel that settling now in your own body, the way your shoulders no longer need to hold the day, the way your jaw can soften, the way your breathing can lengthen and become almost tide-like, in and out, slow and easy, as if your breath itself had entered orbit and then found a safe and gentle landing. Let the bed beneath you feel like this resting craft, secure and unmoving. Let the blanket over you feel like a calm layer of night. Let the darkness behind your closed eyes feel like space at its kindest, not empty, not lonely, but wide and velvety and peaceful, full of distance that asks nothing of you at all. In this sleep story, there is nowhere else to go now. No more engines need to burn. No more course corrections are needed. No more heights must be reached. The rocket has already shown you that motion can be calm, that physics can be soft, that even great journeys are made of balance, patience, and small, careful changes. And now, it shows you one final lesson, perhaps the gentlest of all. That rest is not the opposite of the journey, but its natural destination. So let every remaining thought become lighter. Let it rise a little, drift a little, and then fade into the soft black above the moon. If a memory from the day appears, let it pass like a distant star outside the window. If a worry tries to follow you here, let it remain far behind on the turning earth, growing smaller and smaller until it is only a tiny light among many others, too far away to trouble this calm silver plain. Here, there is only stillness, and stillness is enough. Here, there is only the faint imagined glow of instruments at rest, the pale dust beyond the landing legs, the old crater ridges sleeping under long shadows, and the blue world hanging gently in the distance like something watched from a dream. You do not need to hold onto the details anymore. You do not need to remember every fact about rockets, every orbit, every turn, every stage, every quiet law of motion. They have already done their work. They have already carried you here. Now they may soften and blur and fold themselves into the background, becoming nothing more than a calm feeling, a sense of floating, a sense of arrival, a sense that everything is all right exactly as it is. This gentle bedtime, this calming narration, this long and peaceful path through sleepy science can fade now into simple darkness and breath. Inhale slowly, as though drawing in a little silver moonlight. Exhale even more slowly, as though sending every last piece of wakefulness out across the silent plain. Inhale and feel the body heavy and safe. Exhale and feel the mind light and quiet. Inhale and let the stars remain where they are. Exhale and let sleep come nearer. The craft will keep watch for you. The moon will remain still for you. The earth will glow softly in the distance for you. And you, dear listener, can drift at last beyond story, beyond thought, beyond effort, into deep sleep, into warm darkness, into the soft and endless calm waiting just below the final word.